everyone. So in the training today, we're going to be going over how to price a retainer and having that ongoing, ideally monthly retainer model for your agency. Most of my clients are on this model as it does allow for a ton of scale. And yes, this is still something that happens on an ongoing basis. I know that many agencies are now believing post-pandemic that it is very difficult to actually sell a retainer. And quite frankly, I don't think that's actually much different, but it's just about the way that you're actually positioning it and how it is exactly that you're vetting the actual customer and how you're actually attracting them as well. That allows for you to be able to get that right client. If you don't have the worksheet yet for this training, please do comment below. My team is going to go ahead and put a link to the worksheet below. So, the thing that's really important is that, once you are going from a project oriented model to a retainer model, so that the project oriented model, there's no revenue after, that project's done. And the vast majority of the time, you're having pretty high and pretty significant attrition. Sometimes, as high as 80-90%, where you don't actually get any ongoing work from that particular client. You're always having to replace the revenue, which has you in this constant state of stress, constantly feeling like you have to bring on new leads. And it makes things, very difficult. And for those of you that are working with clients in retainer, that relationship sometimes does tend to fade. And how do you actually allow for you to be able to build that relationship on an ongoing basis, allow clients to fall in love with your deliverables, and making sure that they're continuing to maintain that relationship in a meaningful way? And, workloads, unfortunately, in project-oriented business can be very unpredictable because, you are waiting on clients to actually respond to you, the workflow isn't truly as optimized as you will find in the retainer model. As you get to know clients better and longer, the more efficient your team is actually able to get, because when the client knows you, you know the client, things are able to actually work more seamlessly. So what we're looking to do is actually create a scalable model that really just makes a huge significant difference for how it is exactly that you're able to build things up. And you know what? I'm going to actually just show you essentially what's going on quite starkly differently here. 1 second while I grab my iPad. I just think it's really important for you to really fully understand the amount of difference that this actually causes in and how it's going to affect your agency. So the thing that I see, sort of the way that the project model sort of works, right, is that you have like these peaks in your business. So you're not really ever able to grow in like a truly meaningful way. Yeah, you're growing, but you're growing in the 5 to 15 to maybe 20% increase in revenue. And what really makes a difference, right, is that with the retainer model, you're actually able to, as you bring on more clients, you're actually able to continue to gain. So let's say that you have, at this place, you're at 2 clients, and then you get 4, and then you're at 8, and then you're at 16, right? And then you're actually able to fully have double the amount of revenue on an ongoing monthly basis, right? And it's so incredibly important to be able to recognize the amount of impact that actually has to your business, because it just makes things so much easier on an ongoing basis to have that base amount of income, even if you're going to have a mix between retainer projects and project-oriented work. You're able to actually have a baseline that allows for you to not be in this consistent feast and famine type mentality. And then you're able to really build a more deeper client connection as well. Because you're working with them on an ongoing basis, you're able to build that relationship better. You're able to stay front of mind. You're able to really make small tweaks and actually become a bit more of a consultant to them. And ultimately, the thing that's really, really important here, so you're able to have a lot more of a predictable workflow, which means that you're not going to be as needed so much in client work. And I know for the vast majority of agency owners that I talk to when they first start engaging with us, is that the agency owner is just completely overwhelmed, working obscene amounts of hours and not able to actually get out of the client work. If that's not you, I'm really happy to hear that you have solved that problem for yourself and that you've set up the boundaries correctly. The thing that this does allow for is that your team is able to build those relationships. Your team is able to understand the client a lot more, and you're able to not have to be as actively involved in the day-to-day. So it does have, a very meaningful impact to revenue, to efficiency, and to you as the owner as well. It's truly, honestly, is just a phenomenal model. And I realize that it can feel quite daunting to be able to sell a client on an ongoing model. I mean, it's just making sure that you're being better at client selection and making sure that you're understanding how to actually go about positioning it, things that we can all talk about. And if you have any questions on any of those, please do shoot me a message. If this is something that you're interested in and actually moving to the retainer model, please do leave me a comment below. Let me know that this is something that's helpful for you, and that you're actually looking to move to that model if you're in the project model. And it even would be also great for you to let me know where you currently are, whether you're more project oriented or more retainer model oriented. So the first thing that I think is really important when it comes to being able to set up this retainer model appropriately is having the data that you actually need to be able to make sure that you're tracking these projects appropriately. And the first thing, and I know that I may ruffle a couple feathers here, but the first thing that's really important is that you have to have time data. You have to know how much time it actually takes for you to be able to execute on work and the different deliverables that actually go into that work. And that's the baseline of what you need in order to be able to start to build out this model, track to make sure that things are going on. It is extremely, extremely, extremely important. And I know that as you have probably heard me talk about, if you've listened to any of my podcasts or watched any of my YouTube videos, you will hear me talk about this on an ongoing basis. And there are two camps of agency owners: ones that are really anti-time tracking, they don't believe that it's a healthy and good thing, and then ones that do. And the reason that I think that the vast majority of agency owners believe that it isn't a good thing is because they believe that it's sort of Big Brother watching over their team members, and that's really not what it's for. It's to allow for the agency to be able to grow and actually help you have the information that you need to be able to make the decisions that you need so that your agency can be really effective and appropriate. And so then having an understanding of the other thing that I want to have you look at too is how many projects are you doing in a given year as well. How many projects do you have running concurrently in a given month at the moment? So what is exactly the volume of client load that your team can actually manage on an ongoing basis? And just understanding things from a resourcing side of things is, what can you do? What do you have the capacity to do with the existing team that you have? Clearly, you're not going to move from entirely project-oriented to entirely retainer-oriented tomorrow. That's not a realistic expectation. So there's going to be that transference of that. And one of the things that could be very helpful for you here is actually starting to have conversations with prior clients that you've worked with that were really happy with the work that you did and have done and delivered to them. And even with the active projects that you're actually having right now, is actually putting together a conversation, and we'll have other trainings about this specific process that you can go about to sell them from where they are now at the end of a project into ongoing work. But you can actually have that conversation at the end of the project, at that sunset meeting or the project wrap conversation with the client, allowing for you to be able to, again, remind them why they were engaging with you in the first place and what they were there for, remind them of their goals and what you did together, and continue to talk to them about their ongoing goals. And so how many clients, and so once you have that understanding of how many clients you're actually engaging with on a monthly basis right now, you're able to have an understanding of, how many leads are you needing to actually bring in order to just maintain the business. And if you look at it, you're going to recognize that it's quite a lot for most agencies. It's quite a lot of work that you're having to actually put forward in order to actually bring clients in. And if you're able to retain even a fraction of them, let's say that you're able to retain just half of those clients on an ongoing basis to a monthly retainer. So let's say that, we're working with, we'll call it 20 clients a year, and we're able to retain half of them into a monthly retainer, right? And that we are selling a monthly retainer, and it can be $2,500 to $5,000. And I've got clients that are doing $25,000 to $75,000 monthly retainers. But let's say that we're on the lower end of the spectrum there. Those 10 clients could mean anywhere between $25,000 to $50,000 of monthly reoccurring revenue actually being brought into the agency. And that's on an ongoing basis. So you've immediately allowed for yourself to have to bring in likely, 25%, 50%, 75% less leads than you did prior, to allow for yourself to be able to just have that baseline of income and baseline of revenue. What's really, really helpful here too is that you are then able to actually have your expenses covered, so you don't feel like you're, in that stressed and anxiety place. And it's, quite frankly, just that peace of mind is super helpful for motivation and energy and excitement in your day-to-day operations in the business. It really does change the dynamic quite a bit. And so, the next thing that we want to talk about is, how do you actually price, right? I threw a couple numbers out with some quite staggering disparity between them. But how do you actually go about thinking about the price? And so the first thing that I want you to do, and why I was talking about data first, is that I want you to actually look at the amount of time that it takes for each deliverable. So if you have heard me talk about packages and productization, this is the model that I'd want you to go with. Is you'd have different packages by which you would have built into that retainer, and how exactly you interface with the client. And we'll talk about a couple different models when it comes to the retainers here in a moment as well. But what's really important here is that you have to have an understanding of what it is exactly the deliverables, being able to tie, the high point, the midpoint, and the low point of what it actually took in time to be able to deliver on that project. So with a monthly retainer model, please, if this is how you're operating for a retainer, and I know that this is fairly common practice in the industry, I'm super against it though, is having essentially a bucket of hours that you bill against, and they either use them or lose them type thing, right? Which, what ends up happening in the vast majority of agencies that are in this model, one, clients are asking for, rollover credits, or asking for credits because they weren't able to be used, or you're then being hit with tons of requests at the end of the month. So you're not so busy at the beginning of the month, but you're super busy at the end of the month because everyone wants to now use their hours that they have available. So please, if this is the model that you're using, we need to change it ASAP. Do shoot us a message so that we can, maybe help you walk through how you can go about adjusting that with your clients. It's very difficult model to manage that way. But what I want to have an understanding, and everything is supposed to be on a fixed model, and I'm 100% all across, even if you're project oriented, I'm very, very, very firm a believer in fixed pricing, no hourly pricing. So, how do we go about actually determining how much time it's going to take? Because there's two different pieces that you need to consider when it comes to pricing: is what is the actual fiscal impact of the price? How much time is it going to take? How much is it going to cost me to deliver in either freelancer time or employee time? And what is the value that we're going to be able to provide? So those are the two primary components that you need to think about when it comes to pricing. So the first thing that I want you to do is pencil out what is the minimum cost that you can be charging. And the thing that I see happen so much is that I get asked on an ongoing basis, what are other agencies in my market or in my industry or with the service type, what do they charge? And my answer is, and always will be, it is completely irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. You should be basing your price based on the value that you provide, and every agency is at a different stage in their cycle, and you need to be thinking about the value that you provide. Specifically, you will let your market will actually tell you if you're priced out, because you won't be closing business regularly, and you'll be closing business less than 20%. And so there's that give and take of how good you are at sales and positioning and value proposition, and what your price point is. As you get better at sales, your price point can go up, and that will continue to happen over time. And every agency that I work with has gone through that cycle and has gone from places where they were charging, $25,000 a month to $75,000 a month in one example. And they just got better over time. And we've changed the way that we position the agency, all of that. And it does make, significant impact. But how I want you to spend some time having an understanding of what does it actually take and what does it cost to deliver. And what I see happen so often is that agencies are trying to look at what other agencies are charging, and either they're more efficient or less efficient, and they're trying to make a square fit into a round hole. Your process is different. The way that you actually deliver is different. The way that you interact with the client is different. There's tons of different components to it. And obviously there's some efficiency gains that can be made. But realistically speaking, you need to have an understanding of what it actually takes to deliver and make sure that it's going to be fiscally responsible for your agency now to be able to deliver on that. Then the next component that I want you to think about is what exactly is the value that you're able to provide to your clients as well. And I think this is it's obviously a very subjective type conversation, but the way that I go about having this conversation and would think about this is if you were to take a look at the amount of value that you've been able to provide. So let's say that you've been working on, building new funnels, or you've been working on a new ad campaign for a client and they were able to bring in X amount of revenue because of it. What is a reasonable ROI for them to spend in that type of work, right? So there's obviously other components to that campaign, whether it be ads, whether it be other promotion, cross-promotion, affiliate expenses, like what were those expenses that went into it? And what is a reasonable ROI for them to actually get off of that campaign, and recognizing what that actually looks like. So you're going to take a look at the same thing, the high, mid, low of, your best case, your average case, and your worst case of the value that you're able to provide to clients. And then you're going to be able to now take your financial best, mid, and worst case and your value best, mid, and worst case, and you're able to put those together, having both considerations and making sure that you're pricing appropriately. So that is how I'd want to go about it. If you have any questions, obviously this is, quite a, in-depth type review and conversation to go through, but this is the process that you want to go through to determine what the pricing needs to be. And so I did mention that I wanted to hit on, there's essentially two models that we can go down for your retainer model. And the two different models are specific deliverables, which, it would be same thing as a project, right? Very specific deliverables. This is what you're going to get on a specific cadence, whether it be monthly, whether it be quarterly, whether it be annual, whatever that is. And here's what's included in your package, right? The other ones, which are harder to be able to determine that, is that, let's say that it's ongoing design work, right? That it's not like you have ongoing specific deliverables every single month, or even ongoing branding work, right? Brand stewardship, brand management, that you don't have that deliverable immediately every single month. It's going to happen unless it's, like a meeting, which is potentially a deliverable that you would actually have. The way that I would suggest going about this is actually having either a monthly, quarterly, or semi-annual conversation with the client, actually define exactly what the deliverables are going to be for that given cadence. They continue to pay on the monthly basis, but you actually have that given cadence of here's what's actually going to be delivered in this specific period of time, rather than it being hourly based, which is the sort of default of what a lot of agencies do in the creative space, because it's harder to define that on a monthly basis, because, obviously clients' goals and what they're looking to have happen can change, and sometimes fairly rapidly. So why you would want to take a look at your client demographic and how it is that they work internally, and determine whether it should be monthly, quarterly, or semi-annual. I prefer the quarterly basis. That's the one I tend to see work the best across most industries, but that's essentially the two models that you can go by in the retainer model. What's then super important now is scope. And there's so much scope creep that happens, especially in retainer models, because you've built that relationship. They're leaning on you a lot. They need you a lot. But how do you actually go about making sure that you are defining the scope appropriately? So let's say that we are doing, a web retainer. Obviously, having and building a site versus website maintenance are very different in how you can actually execute on this, right? So you need to make sure that you're being very clear about the types of changes and the types of things that are included in the retainer, be it, we're changing colors, we're changing fonts, we're changing copy, we're changing images. But if it comes to actually overall, site, the site map and actually building new pages, things like that, that is actually going to be a separate project oriented thing. Or if you're going to build that into your scope, you can build it in, but making sure that you have a very clear understanding of what exactly is going to be included in the scope, and ultimately also, which so many people miss, and you really, really need to include this if you're not including it, whether you're retainer model or project model, the amount that you have actually excluded from your scope as well is really important. It's setting the right expectation with the client, so they have a very clear understanding of what exactly are they going to get and how that actually works, so that if there are any changes that are going in that excluded pile or not in that inclusion pile, then you know that you have to then communicate with the client, send them an estimate, and let them know what that cost is going to be for the additional work that they're looking for. It's really, really, really important, and this happens so often, is that agencies are very protective over the information, right? Contractual information, financial information, billing information, because they believe that the more that the team knows and are aware of, the more that the price raises or the increases that they're going to be asking for in their compensation, things like that. If it's an internal team member and not a freelancer, and it can be a freelancer if they're like a permalance, right? Someone that's working with you on an ongoing basis. Be careful with that in the United States and anywhere that has any type of law around freelancers. So just be careful and note that that's something you need to consider. I firmly believe that it's extremely important that you share this information with your team. And the reason being is that they're not going to be able to be successful monitoring the information, because otherwise you have to be involved. You're going to have to be involved, managing the scope, making sure that things are being done correctly, that it's actually hitting the objectives, that the KPIs are being met, and you're the one that's going to have to manage that. What is the point of a team if you end up having to do it all? There's no reason for it, and I think that there's this fear around it, and there's been, if you do not trust your team with this information, you either have the wrong team, or there's something really going on that is causing this massive amount of fear in you. And there's a differentiation between sharing information and overwhelming the team. And there is that line that I think is important to recognize. But do share it with them. They should know what's included in the scope. They should know what it actually is and what ultimately the objective is from a financial end of things for the agency. So the other thing that I just wanted to hit on and just clarify a little bit on that that monthly model is that, if they're not asking for very specific detailed work and you don't have that deliverable, again, there's a couple ways that you can go about it in that monthly planning. The other thing that you can also do in that type of model as well is having, types of sprints, which I think works, and it depends on the actual service delivery that you're doing. And if you are more on the design side, web design, UX, UI type work, that type of sprint model can work quite well. And I've even seen it work quite well in, branding as well, which a lot of agencies haven't adopted this type of model yet, but it does work. And I've seen it work quite efficiently and quite effectively and quite frankly, quite profitably as well. The agency that is immediately coming to mind is in the 30 to 35% net profit and nearing the 8-figure line in revenue now. So they're doing quite well and doing exactly on that model. So just making sure that you have a very clear understanding of how it is exactly that you function, the services that you're offering to your clients and how that all works together, and making sure that we're being very clear on how it is that we're able to bring them the value that they're looking for. Ultimately, the whole point of working with a client on the ongoing basis is that so you're able to actually be a bit more of an advisor and a consultant. And I think that this is, paramount to every single agency, and making sure that you're actually making that transition from being the execution partner to actually being a true consultative advisory partner. And I think it's really important that this actually change, because that's really where the high ticket, high profitability, high value type work does tend to come in. And it's really important that you do make this transition. And this creates a lot more of trust and attachment with your clients. And, the thing that I know to be the case, and not entirely wrongly so, is that most agencies think about, in order for a client to increase the amount of communication that they have with me, they need to pay me more, right? Rather than thinking about it the other way around, is that if I communicate with them more, I provide them more value, then they're going to pay me more afterwards, right? And then you're able to actually figure out what it is exactly that they need, so that you can actually start offering them the services that you offer that you're able to help them with, right? And I think that this is so incredibly important, that you recognize that it's not only good for you, but it's actually good for them. And I actually think that it's an imperative for you to think about it this way, because if you are not offering your clients the services that you can do very well, that's going to help them accomplish their goals, you're actually doing them a disservice. And they may or may not choose to go with it, but you should be offering it to them and letting them know that it's a possibility. And you're able to build greater relationships. You're able to actually help them accomplish their goals. You're able to have a more sticky, meaningful, impactful relationship with those clients. And I think it's so incredibly important that you think about this in every single client that you're talking to, whether it actually is project-oriented or a monthly retainer model as well, is that you are trying to transition from you being the executional partner to an advisor, to a consultant. I really hope that you enjoyed this training. If you have any questions at all, I'm sure that there's, I've covered quite a lot in this video, from pricing to how to actually set up the model, to how to actually manage a scope, to the client relationship. There's lots of things that I hit on. Some things I sort of loosely hit on. If you have any questions about anything, please do comment below or shoot us a message. I'm absolutely here to help. I do really enjoy helping agency owners every single day. So do please reach out. I am absolutely happy to answer any questions that you may have. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks. Bye-bye.